You're listening to Colorado Chamber Office Hours, a podcast that explores what matters most to business. I'm your host, Ed Sealover, Vice President of Strategic Initiatives for the Colorado Chamber of Commerce and editor of the Sum and Substance. Let's get talking. Welcome back once more to our show. Today is Monday, June 29th, and that, my friends, means that tomorrow is officially primary day here in Colorado. We spent our last two episodes of this podcast talking to the two Democratic candidates for governor, Phil Weiser and Michael Bennet, and I would encourage you to go back and listen to those episodes if you haven't yet and you want to know a little bit more about where those candidates stand on the major business issues. Today, however, we want to talk more broadly about the legislative primaries that will appear on this year's ballot. There are 23 contested primaries, 12 among the Democratic ranks, 11 among Republicans. 19 of those 23 primaries are in House races, and 4 others are in Senate contests. And these are not just primaries in open seats. 10 of the 23 involve intra-party challenges to sitting legislators, 7 to Democrats and 3 to Republicans. These primaries involve seats in very partisan districts, meaning that whoever wins the primary is likely to win the general election, but there are also several primaries in key swing districts as well, meaning that in these cases, Democrats and Republicans must decide if they want to back the candidate sitting more to one side of the ideological spectrum, or if they want to pick the more moderate candidate, hoping that will give them a better chance in a tight race in November where independents will play more of a role. I won't try to go through all of these races for you in this podcast, but I will tell you that if you want a more thorough overview of these dynamics, check out a story I posted recently on the Sum and Substance, that's tsscolorado.com, about the impact of these legislative primaries on business issues. Today, I wanted to give you a sampling of what kinds of issues these candidates are discussing as they go to voters in their own parties and ask them for the chance to be their nominees. Because the election is tomorrow, and because we figure only a small percentage of listeners are in any given district, we haven't set this episode up as a pseudo-debate as we did the last two episodes. Instead, we have interviews with two men from two different parties in two different races. First up is Taylor Voss, a Democrat running for the Senate District 3 seat. This is an open seat in the Pueblo area that is currently held by a Democrat, Senator Nick Henriksen, who chose not to seek re-election. This is considered one of the best opportunities for Republicans to flip a seat now held by a Democrat and narrow the margins a little bit in the chamber, where Democrats currently hold a 23-12 advantage in seats. Voss is considered by observers to be the more moderate Democrat of the two in this race, and you may hear that push for down-the-middle solutions to bread-and-butter issues in our conversation. The second interview is with Teddy Collins, a Republican seeking the open Senate District 4 seat in a very red district, running from the more rural parts of Jefferson and Douglas counties, all the way down through places like Teller and Fremont counties. Collins is running to succeed GOP Senator Mark Baisley, who is the Republicans' nominee for U.S. Senate this year. And Collins actually learned not long before we had him on the show that he actually had cleared the field in his primary, meaning that he's very likely to be the next senator from his district. And I think you can note in our interview someone who understands they represent a conservative district, but who also worked to ground himself in a pragmatism that helped him to come out of what was once a crowded primary field as the sole remaining candidate. First up among our Senate District 3 Democratic primary candidates is Taylor Voss, former president of the Pueblo County District 60 School Board. Taylor, thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, we know, and you've just kind of sat through an interview with some of our PAC board members, where you talked about Pueblo being an area that needs jobs, particularly. What can you, as a state senator, do to ensure jobs are created, not just in the Pueblo area, but that can benefit the state as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's something I've always appreciated about Pueblo is the legacy and the history that we have in the state. Pueblo is a community that people from all over the world came to Pueblo to seek employment. You know, they came to the steel mill, and that made our community a melting pot. And families, were able to strive after the American dream because of that and build families there and seek opportunity. That's a legacy that I'm incredibly proud of. And that's a legacy that I want to continue to move forward. I know it's a lack in our community right now. I would tell you, I think a lot of the issues that we face are things like crime and public safety. I know that impacts our small business owners. My brother was a small business owner, and he faced a lot of those issues. Vandalism, homeless population starting fires at the back of his building, leaving heroin needles for him to pick up every morning before kids came in. A lot of businesses in our community face those issues. So I think what we can do in the state Senate and what I can do in the state Senate is try to address some of those issues that ultimately lead to crime and public safety on the addiction services side, on mental health. And then obviously employment comes into that as well. I think we have a gap currently in jobs that we have in the community and people that are properly trained to be able to do those jobs. So I think for me, workforce development is a huge issue. That's something I really want to champion in the state Senate to help bridge that gap. And then I think another issue as well is education. And how do we better align our education system in the community with our economic development leaders and the vision they have for our community? Because I think, and I could tell you, you mentioned my time on the board of education, that was something we didn't do enough, is that we didn't meet up with our economic development leaders to talk about what is the vision, where are we trying to go, and how do we as an education community fit into that. So I think all those issues are things I'd like to address.
Now, you're certainly talking our language when you start talking about workforce development, an issue that I know is big to our members up here. From the perspective of the state legislature, what can it do to improve the workforce development system in this state, which of course would improve it in the Pueblo area as well? But what kind of things could you help to step in and have the state do to get workers more ready for jobs?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like I mentioned before, I think a huge part of it is collaboration and alignment. I think it's a matter of knowing what are we missing currently and what can we better build on. I know that we have a huge need for a lot of CTE programs in our schools and STEM programs and a lot of those opportunities. And I can also tell you, there's been a huge focus in education on higher education and driving students towards that path, which I think is an incredible thing. You know, obviously I went to college and that shaped my life and gave me opportunities that I never would have had otherwise. But I also recognize that that's not a path for everyone, and we need to, I think, have more opportunities and more pathways for students that may not, be taking that path. But there's also other paths available, workforce development paths that, if they're trained in those areas, are going to lead them to high-paying jobs. And I think it's a matter of us as communities and then the legislature of recognizing that, balancing that, and ensuring that we're bringing people to the same table to talk about those issues, and then better inform ourselves about how do we approach solving those issues.
Okay. Now, I know another big issue down in Pueblo is energy, and you
Hmm.
all are about to lose the Comanche 3 power plant,
Yeah,
about to lose it in a number of 5 years or
yeah.
so. Um, eh, how do you deal with that? And I'm curious that in two ways. I mean, what do you want to see from the legislature uh, dealing with energy and how it could affect energy jobs in an area like yours? And also, how do you balance that with what kind of things can the legislature do to ensure reliability and affordability of energy to a place like yours?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, first and foremost, it starts with education, educating the community about the issue, because I know energy is a extremely complicated issue that I think the vast majority of people in our community aren't as informed as maybe they should be or could be. And I think that's part of the responsibility as elected officials, is to better inform the community and help educate them and provide them information and engage and talk about that issue, talk about how important it is for the future of our community, and talk about how it could potentially impact them. I think as we look at that issue, especially in Pueblo County, there's huge economic development consequences. There's a potential loss of jobs, potential loss of tax base, and I'm a huge proponent of a just transition and ensuring that. However, we decide to move forward, that we ensure there are good paying jobs there, that we ensure that we cover as much of that tax base that we currently have from Comanche long into the future, because the county definitely depends on that. So I think for me, priority number one is a just transition and making sure that those jobs are there, that retraining is there, and that we take care of families.
And I'm curious for you, what does a just transition mean? In some places, they talk about, well, we could move these into kind of the traditional renewable energy jobs, solar, wind, etc. But is that what Pueblo needs? Does Pueblo need some nuclear energy or some of the new innovative types of energies that we're seeing coming out? And how do you deal with that as a state senator if you're elected?
Yeah, I mean, I think Pueblo, to be honest with you, is still trying to figure that out, trying to figure out what that best path looks forward. And I think for me, like I said, it's a matter of as an elected official continuing to educate myself on all of those options. And I think we as a community benefit ourselves if we continue to dig deeper and look deeper into all of those options, because it is incredibly important to ensure that families continue to have jobs and can take care of their families. And that's something, like I said, that I'm hugely proud of. The legacy of our community is providing jobs and providing opportunity. And as we go through a transition like that, that's something that we need to keep an eye on and be focused on as well. So I'm committed to doing that work, whatever it looks like.
Taylor Voss, thanks for discussing business issues in your race with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, for our second guest today, we have Teddy Collins. Mr. Collins is a Republican from Larkspur who is seeking the Senate District 4 seat. This is an open seat being vacated by Mark Baisley, who is running for U.S. Senator this year. And Mr. Collins here may have had the best primary season of anyone out there. He cleared the field and is now running in a very Republican seat. So I thought it might be interesting to talk to somebody who is kind of already successfully made it through the primary season about what he's seen as someone who has gone door to door and really tried to get into voters and has had some luck here in getting backing. Mr. Collins, welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having me, sir.
So tell us, what are you hearing the most when you talk to voters about what they're looking for? And of course, we're always going to say, what business issue are you hearing about? But I'll open the question up broader than that because I'm curious, are people talking about business issues when you go door to door for them?
Absolutely, or at least adjacent issues to business, right? So one of the biggest conversations, of course, in Colorado right now is affordability because we're the third least affordable state in the nation right now. So I think that goes hand in hand with business as well because regulation and red tape. We're seeing this on almost every industry in the state of Colorado. It's rising. It's creating increased costs. And that's one of the main problems. I think if we really do cut a lot of this regulation, red tape, and rules, that we could actually unleash Colorado's economic potential, just like we saw when Republicans retook the presidency 12 years ago and cut a lot of regulations, and the market soared and businesses soared as a result.
And certainly that's obviously on the mind of businesses. Actually, before I even ask you the next question, let me just start by asking you about your background because you are running to be one of the few business owners that is in our legislature. Tell us a little bit about the business you own.
Yeah, so I own a company called Spartan Defense Armory and Training out of Colorado Springs. I've got close to 30 employees. I understand the difficulties firsthand, especially in my industry, because our industry, as of last year and the year before, have become the most regulated industry in the state of Colorado, with duplicitous state agencies, regulations, red tapes, additional taxes that we have to submit to the state of Colorado monthly, 6.5% excise tax on top of our sales tax. It just becomes a compliance nightmare for this industry, and even hiring people has become an issue. It takes me close to 2 months to hire an employee because I'm waiting on the firearms dealer division of the Department of Revenue to approve my employees that are literally, applying for an entry-level job. Like, who's going to wait around 2 months for an entry-level job? It's just not going to happen. It makes it really tough to keep people. It makes it really tough to employ people.
And I think normally my next question would be, tell us how your experience being a business owner has influenced your decision to run, but you clearly laid that out pretty well for us. I want to pivot a little bit and say, how do you think you can use your experience as a business owner to influence others when you're talking to them about business issues at the Capitol?
Well, like you said, I would be one of the few business owners at the Capitol. I would use my personal experience and speaking from a place of firsthand information versus secondhand information. And I think that goes a lot further, especially when you're talking to some of the more common sense people in the Capitol.
And I know that you've been up there for about 5 years now, working as a kind of volunteer advocate for a number of groups. And so you know that you're not going to be able to come in and sit in the majority party anytime soon. I'm curious, how does that affect your approach? As someone who's looking for regulatory rollback, who's looking to improve the business atmosphere, how would you go about that being a member of the minority party?
So it would have to be leveraged. There would have again, it would be great just to take a chainsaw to a lot of these regulations, but unfortunately, we're only going to be able to do a scalpel at this point in time because we do have to work in the minority, right? But there are some people, especially in the rural Colorado, even on the other side of the aisle, that I think would be good to work with. That would be some common sense people that we could work together on the things we agree with, especially when it comes to business regulation. I think the people on the other side of the aisle, especially in the Opportunity Caucus, are seeing what some of these regulations are doing to the state, and they're wondering what their party's doing.
In general, what kind of regulations would you go after? And I'm not going to ask for a specific, I want to roll this one back, unless you have one in mind. But how do you go about it? What kind of regulations do you think are prime for this kind of discussion?
So I would say any agency that is duplicitous of the federal government or something that the federal government is already handling in those situations, we should look at rolling those back and cutting that expense out of the state budget in a lot of cases, as well as rolling back some of these regulations that go further than federal regulation in a lot of senses. I'm not saying that there's not a place for state regulation. There definitely is, especially in specific industries. But that being said, we are regulating ourselves to death, and we need to do something. Something has to happen.
Beyond regulation, are there other areas that you think the legislature can impact the business community and the business atmosphere, I think more than anything else, in a positive way?
Absolutely. By cutting back crime in the state of Colorado, we're now the second most dangerous state to live in. If I remember correct, either 2 or 3. A safe environment is a healthy environment for business, especially when business owners aren't having to worry about redundant break-ins and theft of their property and insurance rates going up because of those things.
And that's something I think people may not associate one-to-one right there, the idea of crime and business being so closely linked, particularly in your industry. Are you seeing a lot of that affects the way that you all operate?
Absolutely. A personal story that I can tell is about a year and a half ago, I had my store broken into by 3 minors who were being run by an adult. They stole someone's car, ran it through my store, got through my bollards, got through my metal gates, everything, destroyed my store. It cost me several $100,000 to repair out of pocket because insurance didn't step in the situation, unfortunately. And they maybe got away with $5,000 or $6,000 in inventory. And they were back out on the streets recently because in this situation, they're using those juveniles because we have 100 and some odd juvenile beds for the entire state of Colorado. And literally what's occurring is that when the judge, when they get in front of a judge, there's no space to put them. The judge and the prosecutors are having to decide between, do I put this person in juvenile that committed 3 murders or this person who attempted a murder? That's literally the decisions they're having to make. So in most cases, especially in these these smash and grabs that we're seeing, which has become a common theme, and it's not just my industry, T-Mobile and electronic stores are being hit, vape stores, you name it. And in a lot of cases, small businesses are being hit. They can't afford these types of things. And after the first incident, a lot of insurance companies drop them. They have to seek out and try to find another insurance company. Their rates go up as a result. And that cost gets passed down on the consumer ultimately. And it's a hardship for the business and their employees. So I believe they do go hand in hand. And it's something we really need to rein in here on Colorado, because if we have a safe Colorado, we have safe businesses, and our businesses have the right roots to be able to grow and thrive.
Fascinating perspective. One last question for you. Instead of asking you about how you communicate with primary voters now, maybe I'll ask the general question. What do you do with the rest of your time this year in terms of you're a first-time candidate, at least for the state legislature? You've got kind of a path ahead. Obviously, you still have a general election to win, but in a very Republican district. How do you prepare yourself for what appears to be the likelihood that you're going to be in the legislature?
Well, I'm already starting to think about pieces of legislation and talk to industry stakeholders to see where we can be effective, especially in the minority, and what is practical to be able to get passed, because I'm not going to get my wish list, right? I'm going to have to be practical about what can be done, but something's better than nothing at the end of the day. It's been, for businesses and for regulation, it's been the boiling frog method. Every single year, they add a little bit of heat to the pot, and things get tougher and hotter. Before it's too late, you're stuck there and you can't get out. We need to cool it down. We need to roll it back where we can, practically and reasonably.
Okay. Well, we'll be eager to see what comes from 2027 and beyond. Teddy Collins, Republican candidate for Senate District 4. Thank you for joining us
Thank
today.
you for having me. God bless.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed that look at the issues involved in 2 different primaries involving different parties in different parts of the state. Remember, tomorrow is primary day, so please get your ballots in, no matter which party you are casting them for. And we'll see you back here on the show in 2 weeks. That's all for this episode of Colorado Chamber Office Hours. Once again, I'm Ed Sealover, Vice President of Strategic Initiatives for the Colorado Chamber of Commerce and editor of the Sum and Substance. I'll keep the conversation going at tsscolorado.com, and we'll see you next time as we explore the issues that matter most to business.